Chapter 4. Lost Lambs. Helen Moore was so heartbroken at losing her Mexican storybook about Mystery Mountain that she could hardly hold back the tears. Jack, too, was dismayed, and his parents as well. Maybe it only fell on the floor, Pete suggested, hopefully, and got down to look. But the book was not there. "We'll ask the waiter," said Mrs. Moore. "He may have laid it away while we were eating." But when they called the man, he said he had not seen it. Now a search began in earnest. Even the 4 ranchers joined in, looking on tables, chairs, and serving trays. But the little red volume was nowhere in the room. "Sure am sorry, ma'am," one of the ranchers said to Mrs. Hollister. "Things just seem to vamoose around here." "Did you lose a book too?" Holly asked him. The man smiled. "No, little lady, we've been losing sheep. Just been talking about how we were going to catch the rustler." "The store man wasn't fooling after all," Pam whispered to her mother. "I thought rustling days were over," Pete said. The young rancher looked grim. "No, indeed. We still have 'em out west here." Then the 4 men excused themselves and left the restaurant. "Did you hear that?" Ricky exclaimed. "Rustlers! Yikes, am I glad I have this cowboy outfit. Ride 'em, Ranger!" And he raced around the table. But Helen was not so happy. "Oh dear," she wailed. "How can we find Mystery Mountain without the sketch?" "Here comes the hotel owner," said Mr. Moore, as the man approached. "Maybe he can help us." He asked if the man had noticed anyone leaving the hotel with a red book, but the owner shook his head. "What'll we do?" Helen asked. Suddenly, Pete pointed to the window alongside their table. "Look," he cried. Everyone saw that the screen had been torn from the frame a few inches. Pete snapped his fingers. "That horn blowing wasn't any joke," he declared. "Somebody wanted to get us all out of here just long enough to reach in and grab the book off the table." "Good reasoning," Mr. Moore remarked. "The person must have wanted it badly to go to all that trouble." "But who would want to steal it?" Helen asked sadly. Mrs. Hollister suggested that whoever the guilty person was, he had been outside the window and overheard their conversation about Mystery Mountain. The children ran to the window and peered out, but now the streets were deserted. The residents of Sunrise had all gone home to take their midday siestas. "We'd better finish our lunch now," advised Mrs. Hollister. Smiling consolingly at Helen, she added, "We're all sorry about your book, but I have a feeling it may turn up somewhere." Helen looked a little more cheerful at this. As the group resumed eating, Ricky had an idea. "Let's hunt for clues outdoors," he whispered to the other children. "We can eat fast and finish before the others." Eager to do this, all the youngsters hastened through the rest of the meal. Promising their parents not to go far away, the 7 children rushed from the hotel. "Where'll we look first?" Helen asked as they reached the sidewalk. Everything was very quiet and no one was in sight. But before they could decide which way to go, the children heard the sound of hoofbeats. "Maybe that's the bad man," said Ricky. "Let's find out." Ahead of them, at the end of the street, was a man on horseback, going along at a slow trot. The rider was very thin, and the horse very scrawny. On the man's head was an old 10-gallon hat with a hole in the brim. "Hey, he looks like Mesquite Mike!" Ricky exclaimed loudly. Hearing the boy, the rider turned in the saddle and looked back at the children. Holly clutched Pam's arm. "It is Mesquite," she whispered. Instantly the rider dug his spurs into the horse's sides and galloped off around the corner. "Well," exclaimed Pete, "you'd almost think he's afraid of us." "Maybe he is," remarked Pam thoughtfully. "After all, he took Willie Boot away." "Do you suppose he stole the book?" Holly asked the others. "I'll bet he did," said Jack. "Or Willie." "But how would they know about the book?" Helen argued. "We never told anyone." Pete said he thought that Willie was looking for a chance to play another mean joke, this one on the Hollisters and the Moores. He had been spying on them outside the restaurant window. "I'm going to look for footprints," he announced. Pete ran up to the window, dropped to his knees, and examined several footprints in the dirt. Some were smaller than others. A man's and a boy's, he surmised, and both wearing cowboy boots. The children discussed the suspicious pair as they went back to the front of the hotel. "If that awful boy has my book, I'll probably never see it again," Helen sighed. "Not at all, sis," said Jack. "We'll find Willie and make him give it back." "And if we're around, we'll help you," offered Pete. "You bet we will," the other Hollisters shouted. "I can't be sad long with you Hollisters," Helen smiled. "I guess that's why they call you the Happy Hollisters." Just then the children's parents came out, and the Hollisters said, "Goodbye, we'll see you soon." They hurried into the bus and waved as Mr. Hollister drove down the street and out of town. Once more they went up and down the rolling countryside. Here and there grew clumps of chaparral and pinyon bushes. Ricky's nose was flattened against the window as he watched several cowboys herding cattle. He imagined being out there with the Rangers, helping them round up the steers. "I could use my lariat I got at the Pueblo," he was thinking, when Holly, who was up front, cried out, "Look, Daddy! There's a little girl sitting all alone by the road up ahead." Mr. Hollister slowed down as they neared the child. "Daddy, she's crying," Sue said. "John, we'd better investigate," Mrs. Hollister observed anxiously. "Perhaps the little girl is ill." "Or she might be lost," Pam suggested. Mr. Hollister stopped the bus alongside the child. Pam opened the door and jumped down. "Is something wrong?" she asked, kneeling in front of her. Instead of answering, the girl sobbed harder than ever. By this time, the other children and their parents were out of the bus. "Don't you feel well?" Pam asked softly. I'm all right," the child managed to say, wiping her tears. "But my—" She choked on a sob and could not go on. Mrs. Hollister bent down and put a comforting arm about the child. Taking out a handkerchief, she patted the little girl's eyes. "If you'll tell us what the trouble is," she said kindly, "we may be able to help you." I've lost my sheep," she burst out, her big brown eyes once more brimming with tears. "Lost your sheep?" Sue echoed, and, putting her rosy face close to the other child's, asked very seriously, "Is your name Little Bo Peep?" Sue's funny question made the unhappy girl forget her sadness for a moment, and a smile lit up her pretty face. She was about 8 years old, with a delicate olive skin and black curly hair. Now she shook her head. "No, I'm not Little Bo Peep, though I have lost some sheep. My name is Dolores Vega." The Hollisters were startled. "From Cottonwood Ranch?" Pam asked excitedly. "Yes," Dolores answered. "How do you know where I live?" Mrs. Hollister explained that they were on their way to Cottonwood Ranch this very moment, and told Dolores why. Hearing this made the little girl brighten up. "Would you like to ride to your ranch with us?" Pam asked her. Dolores, tired from her long search, said she would like this very much. She got in and sat between Pam and Holly. For the first time she noticed their fur-trimmed suits, and Pam explained how they happened to have them. As the bus rolled along, the Hollister children began to ask Dolores questions about the lost sheep. She said that among them were baby lambs, and she was very worried about their safety. The girl added that she liked to hug the lambs because they were so cuddly and warm. A little later, Dolores leaned forward. "Please turn right at the next road," she told Mr. Hollister. "It leads right to our ranch." Mr. Hollister did so, and in a short time they came to a series of low buildings set in a beautiful grove of cottonwood trees. "That's our home," Dolores smiled. "It's beautiful," Pam told her. I'm glad you're coming to visit us, Dolores said. The ranch house was built in an L shape with a lovely patio, around which were big bright flowers. Nearby was the barn, made of rough timbers and adobe mud. As Mr. Hollister pulled up in front of the house, a man came out of the door. "John Hollister!" he exclaimed, running up and shaking hands most vigorously with his old friend. "Frank Vega!" Mr. Vega, who was a head shorter than Mr. Hollister, had a pleasant smile. Like Dolores, he had curly black hair and a round, tanned face. "It's a long time since we last met," said Mr. Hollister, then introduced his family. As Mr. Vega met one after the other, he noticed his daughter in the bus. "Well," he said, "I see you've already made the acquaintance of my Dolores." At this moment, a pretty, Spanish-looking woman came from the doorway, followed by a boy of Pete's age. The Vega boy was named Diego. He was broad-shouldered and strong, and his white teeth glistened when he smiled. Mrs. Vega invited the Hollisters to come in and sit down in the long combination living and dining room. It was attractively furnished with Spanish-American furniture and draperies. There was an oversized fireplace in one corner of the room. "Years ago, before you moved here, you asked me to visit you," Mr. Hollister remarked. Then he chuckled. "Now, thanks to Mrs. Vega's special cowboy outfits, my whole family has arrived." The woman laughingly said how pleased she was, not only to see them all, but to find the Hollister children wearing the clothes she had designed. Mrs. Vega explained that she raised rabbits and used their fur to trim the costumes. "Oh, can we please see the bunnies?" Sue begged eagerly. Mrs. Vega smiled and promised they would all watch the rabbits being fed later on. Then the talk turned to more general matters, and the children gathered before the fireplace. Diego began to tell them about Cottonwood Ranch. He said that it was 100 miles long. "Yikes!" Ricky cried. 100 miles? How many days does it take you to get around the place?" "We can do it in a few hours," Diego replied with a grin, "by using Dad's airplane." Ricky's eyes popped with excitement, and Pete whistled. "You have a plane all your own?" he asked in amazement. Diego explained that a plane was absolutely necessary in running a ranch the size of Cottonwood. "It's a great help now in our search for the missing sheep," he said. "Dad's been flying since early morning looking for them." The boy added that about 25 sheep had not returned with the main flock after a storm a few days ago, and there had been no sign of them since. Here Holly piped up. "It's sad that the cute little lambs are lost, too." "We only hope they've stayed with the other sheep," Dolores said. "Won't they all find their way back eventually?" Pam asked. Diego replied seriously, "We're afraid not. Those sheep had no herder, and Dad suspects they did not stray off by themselves." The Hollisters stared at him, and Pete asked the question all of them were thinking. "Somebody took the sheep?" As Diego nodded, Ricky bounced out of his chair. "Rustlers! Oh boy!" Mr. Vega, who had walked over, said, "That's what it adds up to, Ricky." "I know what!" the little boy shouted. "Let's hunt for your lost sheep right away." At this moment, a strange voice said from the doorway, "No, that would be too dangerous."